I'm David Parsons, Media Director for the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. We've reached the end of another year, and 2011 was certainly full of its dramatic twists and turns for Israel and the Middle East. Our ICEJ Media team was there helping keep you abreast of all the developments, and I sat down recently with Chris Mitchell, the Bureau Chief for CBN News here in Jerusalem, and we compared notes about the year and its headlines. Join us now for the Year in Review. We want to welcome back to the program Chris Mitchell, the Bureau Chief here in Jerusalem for CBN News. Welcome, Chris.
It's good to be here, David.
Okay, we're here at the end of the year, and first of all, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy holidays. And we want to talk about, as fellow Christian journalists working here in Jerusalem, reporting on Israel and the Middle East, what were the big stories this past year, looking back at 2011, and what has transpired in the region. And of course, the biggest story is going to be the Arab Spring. And you had a unique perspective on this. You were in Cairo in the midst of the big demonstrations in Tahrir Square. Can you give our folks a recap of that experience for you?
Yeah, I'm sure like you, we were watching all the events of what was happening in Egypt and leading up to the fall of Mubarak. We decided to go down there and do some videotaping and report on what was happening actually on the scene. And we got down into Tahrir Square. And we were there just before what became a riotous situation. We were there a few days after a lot of the violence, and then people were gathering by the tens of thousands. I mean, I think I arrived on a Monday night. That Tuesday, there were about 300,000 people in Tahrir Square. It was sort of a carnival atmosphere. There was a lot of excitement. They were upbeat. They were thinking there was going to be an even bigger demonstration the following Friday.
People were camping out.
Oh, yeah. They had camped out for days. And there was just like a spectrum of Egyptian society. There were Islamists, there were people that were talking about democracy.
You met some Christians, some Coptic Christians out there?
I didn't meet any Coptic Christians there. What I did meet was people who said they wanted democracy, they wanted freedom, they wanted better education, better economy. And there really was a genuine sense that they were displeased, obviously, with Mubarak, and they wanted a better life for themselves. But what happened was that following that, I was there on Tuesday with this excited atmosphere. Then Wednesday, there was this counter demonstration where the anti-Mubarak people were met by pro-Mubarak people. And I was literally about a few hundred feet away from the epicenter when these two groups faced each other. And I just felt in my heart, you could identify with this, I just felt in my heart that the Lord sort of whispered, something's happening. And within a few moments, people were throwing shoes at each other, and which is
a real sign of disrespect.
Exactly. And then it just became, people were throwing rocks, and then people were, there were clubs that were going around. There was fires that started happening, and it was really a tumult. Never been anything quite like that. It was, I had my BlackBerry and my camera that I had used stolen, I think, by undercover police. That was the time when a lot of journalists were being attacked, beaten, arrested. And but that was sort of the beginning, in my experience anyway, of actually face-to-face with what they call now the Arab Spring.
That must have been quite an experience for you. And it took everyone by surprise, the eruption. There were undercurrents there, dissatisfaction with some of these autocratic regimes.
Exactly.
Young people seeing the world through the internet, the Facebook generation. So the undercurrents were there, but it took everyone surprised. But once it started happening, I think we both agree, the question is, will the Islamists take over?
Exactly.
Is that where we're seeing it now?
Oh, I think by this time, now that we have the retrospect of the many months from then to now, that's exactly what happened. When I was there was this genuine sense, let's have democracy, let's be free of Mubarak. But what's happened is basically what began as an Arab Spring is really turning into an Islamic winter. And we've seen, I think, now 2 rounds of elections in Egypt, and where the Muslim Brotherhood has taken maybe 45% of the vote. And surprisingly, the Salafist, even more extreme Islamist than the Muslim Brotherhood, has taken maybe 20%.
They got a quarter of the vote.
It's extraordinary.
Very shocking.
Yeah, shocking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so it looks very ominous that Egypt is changing from what was an autocratic rule, but still somewhat friendly or at least tolerant of Israel, to perhaps something much more dangerous.
But we've seen it in Turkey, which had something of a democracy. They voted
Right.
for this Islamist party, the Turkish chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood. We saw it in the Palestinian areas. This is a few years back. They voted for Hamas over the more secular Fatah. And now in Tunisia, in Morocco, and now in Egypt,
Yep.
the Islamists are coming to power. They're better organized. They're offering people, a chicken in every pot, and people go for it.
Yeah, they
It's
do, and they
really
have a
scary.
history. I mean, they have a history of being helping people, humanitarian works, and Hamas has done that, and so the Muslim Brotherhood does it as well. And it's really this sweep, like you said,
Yes.
from Morocco all the way to Egypt and even Syria right now.
Yes.
Those that are opposing the Assad regime, many of them are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood as well.
You give them a choice, and most Arabs are going to vote for an Islamist power, which is basically a party that says Islam is the answer, Sharia law.
Yeah.
Okay, one of the things that surprised me as far as biggest stories of the year, of course, the Arab Spring has been the big story. I think 2011 will be most remembered for that. But I think there was an effort by the Palestinian Authority to take advantage of the chaos in the region to try and bring the anger and hatred of Israel. As long as the Arab street is in commotion and turmoil, it's a good time to try and direct that against Israel. They tried to do this unilateral move for a Palestinian state this year. United Nations, a lot of efforts to delegitimize Israel. This flotilla. Back in May, there was another effort at a flotilla, and then a flotilla, hundreds of activists, pro-Palestinian activists, trying to fly into Ben Gurion for a big propaganda coup. Everyone, all the media would cover them getting arrested in the airport. And so I think, one of the big stories that from this year is what did not happen. We didn't have a Palestinian state. And I was surprised at the ability of Israel this year and the competence of the government. Maybe you'd like to comment on this, on being able to make the right moves to fight some of this back. And for instance, the activists who were going to fly into Israel, they congregated in Greece and Athens. And because Turkey has turned against Israel, and because of the find of oil or natural gas off the shore, off Cyprus, between Israel and Cyprus, which the Greeks have an interest there, Greece has moved closer to Israel this year, and the Greek authorities held back most of those activists in the Athens airport, and therefore the whole situation was diffused. And when you consider the efforts Israel made to beat back the Palestinian bid at statehood and these attempts to embarrass and delegitimize Israel, Israel did a good job, and there were things that could have happened amid all the turmoil of the Arab Spring that did not. And I think Israel can actually declare victory on some of this.
Yeah, I would agree. I think what they did an extraordinary job in the United Nations, and they blunted this move by the Palestinian Authority. They had a compelling argument which said that you can't declare yourself unilaterally if you're going to withdraw from direct negotiations with Israel, and it worked. And I think they worked within the Security Council to get enough votes so that even the United States didn't have to use their veto. So I think that was a powerful diplomatic effort by Israel, and I think they blunted what could have been a huge breakthrough for the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, so we can say there were some bright spots in the news this year covering the Middle East, and another is this. I think this is the year Israel realized it does have this enormous wealth sitting out there under the seabed off Haifa, and they've also found oil shale that properly extracted, if they can, economically make it viable. Some estimates they have as much oil reserves here through shale oil in Israel, the equivalent of what the Saudis have.
Exactly.
And this year it sunk in that the Knesset has already debated how they're going to spend that money before it ever comes. But anything else bright this year that you remember?
Well, I would say we're doing a story just on that. That is a huge story. I mean, not only the natural gas in the Mediterranean, but the shale oil. And it's really complements each other. And I think it really could be a game changer here in the Middle East and actually the world. If Israel could actually become an oil exporter, take care of its own needs, it really could change the whole dynamic in the region and the world. That's one thing. I think just to go back on one other main story is the fact that the IAEA came out in November and they basically said Iran is building a bomb. Everybody perhaps knew that anyway, but it became official.
Yes.
And in the publicity that happened during that 2 or 3 week period, both before the announcement and afterwards, that Israel was willing to attack Iran, that became the big buzz.
Yes.
I think that's another huge story. Maybe not quite as big as the Arab Spring, but one of the main stories here.
I think you have to credit that to the new director of the IAEA, Amano, this Japanese guy, because he comes from a nation who knows well the suffering from and the power of nuclear weapons. And he replaced the Egyptian El Baradei, who was trying to cover for the Iranians.
Exactly.
And that's why they came out with a report that says, forget the guesswork. They are pursuing a bomb designing one to fit on their Shihab missiles. And that's very ominous going into the next year.
Right.
Just want to, our annual tradition, what's the big chutzpah, the really funny story you remember from this year?
I don't know if I'd call it funny, but I think it does qualify as chutzpah, as Obama said just in the last week or so, that more than any other U.S. president, that he's stood behind Israel's security. And given his history with Israel in the last 2 or 3 years as he's been president, I think
he's
that
been
was
a bully.
He's been a bully, exactly. And if we can remember just a couple of months ago when he and Sarkozy were caught off mic, they thought they weren't being recorded when he talked about,
he affirmed that
he says, I have to deal with
Netanyahu.
Netanyahu. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that was a bit of a chutzpah on Obama's part.
Yes. Now, mine goes to his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who recently questioned Israeli democracy. It's being undermined by these segregated buses in Jerusalem and the ultra-Orthodox communities here. The men sit at the front, the women in the back, and she says this is undermining Israeli democracy. And yet, where she served as a senator from New York, and during that time, she never complained about the buses in Orthodox Jewish areas in New York City, where there is men sitting at the front, women at the back, the people accept it, and no one's ever said it's undermined American democracy. That's my chutzpah story of the year.
That sounds like it qualifies. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be an exciting year coming ahead of us. We'll get together next year, hopefully, and do this again, Chris. But again, Happy New Year, and thanks for being here with us.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
2012 promises to be full of more surprises and dramatic developments for Israel and the region. And the ICEJ News team will be there keeping you abreast of all the latest headlines through our daily news service, our weekly radio show, Front Page Jerusalem, our monthly magazines, and now our latest dimension, ICEJ TV. Please join us to find out more at www.icej.org.